Hi everyone, it's Toby and welcome to my channel. Today we are, as you can see, sketching outside. Today is a video all about en plein air, real life, urban sketching. We are in a little village, so I'm going to show you a really simple step-by-step process to getting your outside sketches on the page. I'm going to show you how I find my scenes, which is a question I know that I've been asked quite a few times recently. How to find your scene, how to get the perfect place to sketch outside. Apologies for the self-promotion, but if you do enjoy my stuff, please do like and subscribe and consider checking out my website, sketchloose.co.uk, for in-depth courses. So the first thing I always do is take a nice little walk and look around, find what I'm looking for in a scene. And I've done that this morning, and I found this street. And this street may not immediately look amazing, but that's where continuing to walk and look around is really important, because where we're sketching from is just as important as what we're sketching. So if we look at these sort of houses front on, behind me there, they're not ugly. They're also not drawing me in. They're not making me really excited to sit down or stand up and sketch. But as I get to the end of the street, now this is starting to look really interesting. And why is it looking really interesting to me? Well, because I know the kind of things that I enjoy sketching, and that is shapes. And we can see, look, we've got these little shapes on top, these triangles, we've gone to rectangles, a triangle and a rectangle which are hidden. We've got these circles and these circles here, and these shapes are all interacting. None of them are on their own, they're all melded together, creating something really, for me, fun and interesting. Beyond that, we've got all these shapes, all these little details. I can already imagine the flow of green coming down, or perhaps a splash of blue which loops into these greens and creates shadows. And when we mention shadows, look at this light shadow, some really clear contrast. So no matter what we choose to do, when it comes to our colours, or our hatching, or our tone, or value, we're going to have something we can focus on. We're also going to have to simplify. We're going to have to reject some of that interest so that we can actually sketch it and not overwork it. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And this is what I got with me. So I've got my IKEA mallet case. You can see really nice firm surface to work on, and inside loads of storage. So I can bring all sorts of paper with me, just a few sheets of a few different things really. And then all my pens, a water brush, I've got fine liners and fountain pens, and inside little zip I've got my watercolours with the same 14 colours I always use, listed up on urbansketch.co.uk/supplies if you want to look. Got my travel brushes. These are great because they store away, and the main reason to store them away, pop their heads back on over the top, is to stop them from getting damaged in our case. I just need to get a couple more things out of my bag, like my little clippy pot, which I can fill with water. Then I'll clear up my space and I'm ready to go. So just start with a nice clear space, and we can start with step one. Now, step one is going to be all about getting that clear, simplified image on the page. Now in this video, I don't just want to explain what I'm doing, I also want to answer your questions, the questions that you guys asked me in one of my recent community posts. And one of the great questions was, how do you decide where to start? Is there any method to your madness? And sometimes I fear there isn't any method to my madness, but actually, yes, there is a method. I tend to start on the focal point. So I've started on this row of houses, which is definitely our focal point. And not just starting on this row of houses, I've started on the shapes at the top of the houses, working out how these top shapes interact. And I don't just stick necessarily with just the big shapes when I'm outside, because everything can change, light can change, sometimes we need to move on. So often I sort of take a higgledy-piggledy approach. So you can see I've done some big shapes, I've done some little shapes. So here's another big shape, but then immediately I jump up to the little shapes of the chimney. And that helps us get the scene going nice and quickly, compared to inside, where we know we can take as long as we want and the scene is still going to be there for us. A key part of being outside is a bit of comparative measurements. If we measure across, we can compare the top of this short house comes in at the eaves, or the lower part of the roof of the top house. The top of this chimney, however, meets the top of the other chimneys. And this kind of thing is really valuable when you're outside doing comparative measurement, because this house is much smaller than the others, but it could be really easy to suddenly get confused and get it all wrong. But if we just compare it around, we'll sort of take a carefree approach and we'll get it approximately right, which is good enough for me. I don't just stick with these sort of man-made shapes either. So here's lots of lovely bushes and trees. Those bushes and trees we can simplify into little swirls. We can make them more complex if we want, but for me there's so many bushes, trees, plants that actually just simplifying them, giving them a kind of unified feel where all the bushes are going to be simple swirls. Well, that's going to let the viewer know, looking at this scene very easily, what is going on, what are all of these different things I'm trying to suggest. Again, notice how I'm moving along the top of the image. I've drawn some of the middle of the image, but I've not finished off the bottom of the image. This is for a couple of reasons. One, I talked about already that measuring across is really useful. Getting that top line in is really useful. And I personally find the top line, how everything interacts at the top, more clear. It's easier to see because there's a bigger contrast. I also find it more interesting because things like chimneys poking up, wires sweeping across. Also, getting the bottom is actually very challenging, I think. It isn't clear where things join up. It isn't clear sometimes, where does this tree end? Where does the next one end? Where's the pavement? Where's the person standing? All these things are decisions we can leave till the end when we've got the rest of our sketch looking cool. Now, I've left out some of the other cars, but this car feels like a part of the scene. So I don't know if you can tell, just to the left of where my pen is right now, I've drawn in some headlights and a suggestion of a car. And we will complete that later. But it felt to me, because it's part of the overlapping scene, it felt important. And again, we measure across, just jumping to another part of the scene, measure across to get that window. And the reason I was doing that is, if you notice, that window is at the same level as the roof of the other house. And I wanted to go, I'm sure that's right, but actually it shouldn't be right, should it? Should a window be the level of the roof? And then I could look at my image, measure across and go, yeah, that is actually correct. I've not sort of just got this wrong when I was drawing more intuitively. So just sense checking is the other value in all those measurements. Having got that top and middle of my sketch done, now we come to the difficult part, suggesting all these fences, creating some, where these cars, I'm removing them, I'm going to have to create the bottom of the scene. And you see, to do this, I simplify hugely. So I take these fences and I turn them into some jagged squiggles. And then, enough of that stressful bit for me for now. So I'm going to move back to something I'm more happy with. I'm going to grab these trees. Now you can see I exaggerate the size of these trees. And that is two reasons. One, actually, from my point of view, they were a little bit taller than they are there. It's just the photos taken from a slightly different point of view. But also to balance the scene, to keep some, at the moment, all the weight of the scene is on the right. But getting something just a bit taller on the left prevents the scene just feeling like it's all falling off. Now, what I'm doing is I'm just getting very loosely a kind of suggestion of the grass verge, which you can't quite see in my photo. And then coming back in and again, really loosely suggesting the edge of the pavement, some of the bushes and trees coming in. But because it's difficult, keeping it simple, suggestive, and a bit abstract. And that's fine, because the eye, I don't want it drawn to a really hard and firm curb. I want it drawn to all these fun buildings, these shapes, the bit that actually drew me to this scene. And just like that, we are done. Some loose suggestions, some shapes, some little shapes, and a little bit of thinking about composition, and we can move on to step 2. So step 2, I thought it would actually be helpful to show you that, as much as I love sketching outside, it still takes a bit of a balancing act to get everything around you. No one's got a perfect solution, and it's all about trial and error. You'll never be as comfy as when you're sat in your studio. And so, we all face this problem where it's not so easy. And it's just fortunate I have a chair to be on today, so I can keep my water down there, just at the lower right corner. And I'm now just going to start with my loose colours, my loose and light colours. Step 2, loose and light colours with my size 12 round brush. And you can see I'm starting really loose. I thought, let's reverse this. Let's just splash some blue in and then take a little bit of blue and move it around. See what those shapes have formed? Move it around. And I said at the beginning, this is about minimalist colour. And I also mentioned that because there's so much shadow, there's so much colour, so much detail, we're going to have to reduce a lot of that. And so just starting with these loose splashes and then just using that pigment, moving it around, creating some little loopy shapes, doing something a bit fun, a bit abstract with it, and then enriching it, that's going to make sure I don't go too far. If I just smash a load of blue on my brush and start this sky, well, I can't take that back. I can't come back from it. Now, next, moving on to these greens. This is Cascade Green, and what I want to do is get this swirling effect. So we've got the circles of the line work. So let's now get the circles with the brush. And combining a dull green, so that's a Cascade Green initially, we're now with a gold green. That sort of two-toned approach, followed up even brighter with some Hansa yellow, gives you a sense of light and shadow. But do you notice also in some of these bushes we've got little red touches, red flowers. So I'm going to expand on that and add red in a few more places. And then come back with more greens, again in these lovely loops. This time I've got a green Apatite Genuine, a much more murky and deep and granular green. And that can kind of give us more texture, very easily give us a lot more texture. But I want to keep moving around and just seeing different bits, different places to have a bit of fun with. And you can see in the background now, let's just move away from the trees. This is a little bit of sepia, and I'm using this as a kind of warm tonal colour, something to suggest a bit of darkness, but without it being too dark. And just touch that in a couple of key places and move around back to my greens. So when we're doing this minimalist colour approach, what we don't want to do is flood the page. I'm using very wet colours so I can move them, but I hope that what you're understanding as I move around is I'm going from one place, touching in some colours, giving them a shape, giving them a texture, to another place, touching in, giving them a texture. This is the same idea. Look, I'm just filling that kind of pavement with a sort of random mix really of all my dark colours to give it just a tonal shape, which then can absorb some of that green. Add in a few splashes. Splashes are absolutely wonderful for providing texture of tarmac. A little bit more of that shadow on those. Do you see how the chimneys have really dark shadows? So a little bit of shadow suggests that. And then find a few more of those darkest shadows. And before you know it, our step 1, our loose colours are done. What we want to do in this step is not go too far. Have it so that we can add to it, not so we want to take it back. And there you go. 5-10 minutes, we'll be back after sitting, listening to some birdsong and be doing the next step. And here we are. And you can see not only has nature joined us, a little ant having a journey across our page, also our colours have muted and softened. And we can go on to step 3 using our smaller brush this time. So this is my size 6 round brush. And this is going to let us be even more specific with our colours. So we're looking for intense colours, intense areas. So look within those shadowy parts of the houses. Do you notice how some of the windows are really relatively bright? So I'm going to exaggerate that. I'm going to bring that blue reflection into them. But they're not entirely bright. They also have darkness in them. So this is another opportunity for our shadow colour. And because we have our smaller brush, we can now be more specific and produce these darker, bolder touches. Looking around, I'm just finding not just areas in the scene which need something, I'm also finding areas on my art which need something. So if I want to introduce darkness where there isn't, I can. If I want to introduce light or a bold colour where there isn't, I can. That's, it's my art, that's what I want to do. And so I am moving around and applying these little touches just in a couple of places. Now with our bolder colour, this is going to create much more of a contrasted feel. So we need to be careful not to overdo it, or we will lose that gentle subtlety. And I'm just using the same colours. So I had the cobalt blue for the reflections, followed by a little bit of sepia and dark mix, followed by some cascade green, and now this is, actually sorry, it's followed by green gold, and now this is some cascade green. And there isn't necessarily a science to what I'm doing. It's more about just looking and going, where are things a bit flat? Where are there shadows? So under the trees, there's shadows. At the bottom of the houses, I want to create a more murky feel. Where are there lovely little textures, like little flicks of grass, flicks of leaves coming up? And that is exactly what a bolder layer of colour is there to do for us. Especially in the foreground, really great place where you really can see big tall grass, big tall things which want to be painted. Again, let's emphasize some of those reds. They were a lovely touch, but as with watercolors, they have faded. So we emphasize them again, and we can put them in places they're not. It's fine. It's my art. And what I'm trying to do is balance the color. So when there's red in one place, it's going to really draw the eye. If it's in 2 or 3 places, it will feel more balanced. I want as well to make little features of silly things. This car, I want people to know it's a car. So just making the number plate and the light yellow really draws a tiny bit of attention to it and lets people know exactly what it is. Again, making my own decisions here. I love red chimneys. I just think they're great fun. I love how I draw chimneys. They're one of the things that I really enjoy drawing. So I like making a feature of them. I also think some of these windows, we've got a lot of negative space going on. Negative space being the sort of absence of colour, the absence of value, and therefore whiteness of the page. That is great. It draws the eye in. And if you just add sometimes a little shape and shadow to it, it's a great way of leaving that negative space, leaving that powerful suggestion, but not making it washed away. And with that, a few splashes, bit of texture, we can move on to step 4. And of course, step 4, we've got our pen back out. Now, you might have noticed that I've swapped around my processes a little bit in some ways, or reduced the number of steps. That's again because we are outside. Outside is a bit different to the studio in that it's less comfy, it's less certain, it's more experimental, anything can happen, and normally everything goes wrong. So I don't stick to quite as rigid a process, but I use the same ideas. So like with inside, when I'm practicing inside, I come back and I'm just restructuring. What we're doing, gentle touch to capture those outlines, those clear shapes. And I hope you can see what's happening by applying this dark ink. We're bringing things forward. Now look, I haven't let the page dry, so I've got this ink washing out into the sky. Don't panic. Mistakes will happen. Mistakes have happened in this. Hundreds of mistakes already in this one painting. That mistake was one I didn't want to live with and I didn't have to live with. So I didn't panic and I lifted that ink out with my brush. And then we can just calmly keep going. I don't want to overdo this. I like this actually. I'm quite a big fan of what's happened on the page today. So I want to take a gently approach, softly adding textures, softly boldening just a few key areas, working out, what's worked on the page, what might just need to be a bit clearer, what needs to come forward and be made a feature of. And as we do that, as we move around, we'll just gently finish off our image, not overdo it. Now, a key thing to remember as well, look, I'm outside right now. I'll be inside later with a new pair of eyes, a bit more comfort. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to sign it. I'm going to write where I am, Great Granston, having a lovely little view of these houses, and later I can come back. Now, thank you so much guys for watching this video. Please do hit the like and subscribe button. It's an unbelievably big support to my little channel. And if you would like to check out my courses, go to sketchlease.co.uk. I've got a new free course up there, link in the description in a comment below. So check that out and I will see you in the next video. So thank you everyone for watching my little sketching videos. If you enjoy my content, please do subscribe to my channel because it makes me really happy. Thanks again.